St. Paul was born first with the name Saul, and in one language, the word Saul and the Roman word Paul all have the same meaning as the English word small, right? Now, when I was on internship, there was a young boy, and you'll understand what I'm saying. It took him so long to come out the birth canal that his grandmother called him Tortoise. Can you imagine going through life being called Tort and having that memory? I don't understand why Paul, they knew he was going to be small when he was not even just barely born, but that's the name they gave him, Saul. He had a thorn in the flesh. And he was trained in the best tradition, trained by the best rabbis of his day, but he talked about this thorn in the flesh, and we don't really know what it was. He asked God to take care of it, but God said, "No, my grace is all you need." Could it have been that some think that Paul had a bad eye? You know, I think we call it amblyopia or something. Others think that he had what we used to call a dowager's hump, a really bad spinal thing of the back. Others thought that it was a lust issue that Paul couldn't get rid of. We don't know what it was, but Paul struggled with that. But God said to Paul, I'm all you need. And Paul is always shown, he's the guy on the left, in the middle, right above John the Baptist. He's the guy on the left, and he has a sword because Paul speaks of the gospel as being the sword of the Spirit. So he always, in all pictures of Paul, he has a sword. Because the gospel is powerful. One day, Saul found out that all these Christians were changing the Jewish religion. And so he became a persecutor of Christians. And he would take Christians and put them in jail or put them under house arrest. And one day he's going to Damascus, Syria, to take care of the Christians that are there. And on the way there, a bright light comes and he's thrown off his horse, and the voice from the bright light is Jesus. And Jesus says to Saul, "Why are you persecuting me?" Well, he just kind of was struck without knowledge, and also something like scales went in front of his eyes, so he couldn't see. And after all this was over, Saul's friends had to help him to the town, and he was there for 3 days, just alone in his blindness and in his questioning and in his revelation of Jesus and the question. And then God got a hold of a guy named Ananias, one of my favorites in the New Testament. And Ananias came to Paul and laid his hands on Paul and healed him from whatever was on his eyes, and then spent weeks talking to him about the gospel. And Paul, the former persecutor of Christians, became the best Christian missionary ever. He traveled all around the Roman world. He wrote tons of letters and stories and sermons. He preached the good news. He was persecuted left and right. He founded churches, and at the end of the book of Acts, he ends up going to witness to witness to Caesar Augustus. And while he's there, we don't know actually what happened, but at the end of the book of Acts, we find that he is imprisoned in house arrest. And tradition states that Paul and Peter ended up in the same jail, not too far from the Roman Forum. And then Peter was killed by being hung on a cross upside down, and Peter was killed by Paul. Peter killed upside down. Paul had his head cut off, right? Because he was a Roman citizen, and that was viewed as a humane way to kill somebody. If you go to Rome today, you can travel to the church called St. Paul outside the wall, because at that time it was outside the city of Rome. And there in the church, the beautiful church of St. Paul outside the wall, hanging above the altar in a golden reliquary, in a golden box, is Paul's skull. It's just like, why? But at any rate, it's there. But his martyrdom witnesses to the love that he had for Jesus. His martyrdom witnesses to the faith that he has. So there's 4 things that I just find really important in Paul's writings that I want to raise tonight. Number 1, the cross and the empty grave are central. All throughout St. Paul, the cross and this empty grave are central. One of our readings from Philippians, Paul speaks about Jesus having emptied himself, being fully God from beginning. There is no beginning to God, but from wherever, from always, Jesus fully God, but emptying himself of that Godhead and being poured into Mary and becoming human, both human and divine, and for those 30 years, humbly living as one of us, until he died at the cross. Everything centers on the cross. We even do that with our time. We have BC and AD, right? We separate because Christians decided to change the time. So we separate our days, our chronology, excuse me, based on the cross and grave of Jesus. And that centrality says to us that that there's nothing stronger in God's love. God can go all the way to the ends of the earth. God can go to the extreme of death because of his awesome love for us. Everything is hinged on the cross because it's there as God decided we would be freed and redeemed and sanctified and blessed because of God's only self-giving. So, cross and grave are central. And because the cross and grave are a gift, point number 2 is grace, that undeserved love of God. We try to better ourselves and think we're going to make God happy. We try to do things for other people to think that they will be happier with us. We can't make God happier. We can't make God love us more. There's nothing that can do anything to make God love us more. His love for us is full and complete. It is the gift of God, Paul writes, so that no one can boast. You have been set free. We are graced by God's presence. Everything we do is wrapped in that love of God. And sometimes I don't feel it, right? Or sometimes I try to do stuff that I think that God would approve of, and we'll get into some of that later. But I can't make God love me more, even when I don't love me enough. Did you catch that? Maybe you have the same issue. I can't make God love me more because it's so full and complete, starting with the cross. Well, starting from the beginning, but centering on the cross and the empty grave and the gift of grace. Then Paul would also say, therefore, live a life worthy of the calling to which you've been called. Sure, we have this awesome gift of grace, so let's just sit around or go to Mr. Freeze and eat ice cream all day and all night. That would not be a bad idea. Or, better yet, the sausage gravy down at Front Street is just superb, the cafe. We can't. But because the cross is central, because God gave God's self so completely and rose from the dead, and out of that we are forgiven and free. We're called to live a different life. Now, I've mentioned to many of you that Philabaums do some strange things, and we have some certain food rituals or action rituals or things that we just do as Philabaums. One year we all went skiing, and my mother made us all snoot boots. Snoot boot is a little bit of knitted yarn that goes right here, and it's tied in the back. It's a nose warmer thing, so when you're skiing, it looked with a little tassel at the end. It looked absolutely ridiculous, but we all wore them because we're Philabaums. There's things that we live out because the cross is central, because we are filled with grace. There are ways that we live a life of forgiveness, of morals, of love. There's the big word, of reaching out to the poor and the orphan and the widow and the stranger and the refugee, of being people who reach out and care for others. St. Tertullian once noticed, look at the Christians, see how they love each other. How awesome it would be to bring that back in our time, that even if just the Christians loved each other around the world. But because of the cross, because of the infusion of grace, we live a life differently so that others can see Jesus in us. Someday, Paul also says, someday Christ will return like a thief in the night. Jesus said that. Paul speaks of the time when Christ returns quickly, and we shall be raised. The trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. Those who are alive when Christ comes and those who have died will be raised from the dead, and together we will be new people, new bodies, and we will be with all those whom we love. And there are folks in this place like, I forget now, Luther Henline was here or here, right? I don't remember which one, right? This one. Yeah. I mean, the Luther Henlines of this world and all the awesome parents and grandparents and folks that we love surrounding God's throne, it will only be joy. It will only be health and wholeness. It will only be grace. Some of us have lost some pretty wonderful people, and we live life tough because we miss their being. But that promise that Paul speaks of, when the trumpet sounds, all will be made right. Because the cross and grave, Jesus destroyed death, gives us the gift of grace. We're called to a new way of living because we're part of the family. And someday we'll be together, all of us, all good. And then we come to next week. So wherever we are, next Sunday we're going to join with the disciples as the people pull palms off the trees and put them underneath the donkey as Jesus rides his way into Jerusalem. We're going to be with Jesus as he speaks to the crowd, as each night he goes back in Bethany to live probably with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're going to go with Jesus on Thursday when he comes to the upper room. And there he washes his disciples' feet. And there he takes the bread of the Passover and says, "This is my body." And he takes the wine of Passover and says, "This is my blood." We don't know if Judas left before that or during that or after that, but we do know that at least he was there for the foot washing. But at some time in the meal, he left to get things ready for Jesus' betrayal. Then after the meal was done in the evening, the disciples, we go with them to the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus prays so intently that he not have to suffer. "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." Judas eventually comes with the soldiers and the chief priests and the authorities, and they take Jesus, arrest him, and the disciples flee away. Throughout the evening, we're there as Jesus is tried and mocked by the Jewish leaders. And then early in the morning, we go to Pilate's house, where the crown of thorns is placed on his head, where Jesus is whipped 39 times, because 40 would be a whipping of death. So almost to the point of death. And then by 9 o'clock in the morning, he's on the cross. So central to St. Paul, so central to our understanding of who God is. God gave God's awesome self so completely, opening his hand so wide on the cross to bring in the whole world. From 9 o'clock in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus hangs on the cross. There is darkness over the world from noon until 3. Mary, his mother, is there, and favorite disciple John, and then Mary Magdalene, and in come Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. And about 3 o'clock, they take him down from the cross and place him in Joseph's tomb, which was nearby. And because it was nighttime and they weren't allowed to be in the cemetery at night or close to nighttime, they had to leave. And then it comes to Saturday. And of all the story, we kind of know Saturday because we've lost people we love and we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. There's a deathly silence. There's a hope that's going to be around the corner, but we don't know fully what that means. And yet we wait and we sit and we try and figure out our days after death has come for a loved one. Then Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb, right? You know this. Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb, expecting to put the ointment on the dead body of her friend, and finds that the tomb is empty. And she meets him, and he calls her by name. Mary Magdalene is the first to see the resurrected Jesus, and she goes and tells the disciples what she has seen. Everything changes, because God has said the worst thing that can happen to you is death, and I've conquered that. I'm stronger than anything. So any burden we carry or any struggle we have or any stuff of our history of which we are ashamed or we're trying to deal with, God says, I'm stronger than that. My love is that which makes you whole and healthy, and I'm with you always. Paul speaks to us. Good news. Now, I wonder why Ohio State came on when I said good news. I just want to register that. I mean, it was not that valiant people up north. All right, come back into my brain. Come back to focus. Right? Paul tells us the whole issue of the gospel, the love of God that never ends, the call to live a life worthy of that calling, but we are wrapped in grace through the end. Pretty awesome. Holy Jesus, thank you for the words and ministry of St. Paul and of all those who have gone before us, but mostly thank you for your love and your amazing grace. To you, Jesus, be glory forever and ever. Amen.